Jining rested her chin with one hand and sat quietly by the window of the aircraft, watching the crew outside making set arrangements for the upcoming movie. The efficiency of the staff is very high, and the large-scale instruments for playing holographic images are arranged in an orderly manner. The old house is even more eerie and dark. There are other people in the aircraft, just like Jining. They are all actors who will participate in the filming. Jining looks handsome and beautiful, the corners of his lips are naturally raised slightly, as if he is smiling at any time, and his skin is white, the pupil color is also very light, it is a beautiful light brown, the whole person is a little more sub-soft temperament. But now Jining is expressionless and does not say a word, because he wants to maintain his own personality contrary to his appearance. He is a arrogant and indifferent genius in the novel setting. He is definitely not will take the initiative to communicate with several other people. As an experienced traveler, Jining cannot allow himself to make low-level mistakes that violate the basic settings. Jining remained silent, and the shadow reflected in the window looked at a certain handsome man present. This man was the protagonist of the novel that Jining transmigrated into, the movie King Gu Chen. This novel is called Rebirth of the Interstellar Actor. It is in the future interstellar era. The main content is the story of how actor Gu Chen returned to the peak after being reborn for 100 years and surpassed his previous achievements. The movie, playing a supporting role, while Ning Ji plays the leading role here. The setting of Jining is the opposite of Gu Chen in the original book. He is a new talent and a movie star, and his hidden identity is the prince of a well-known entertainment company. The villain, but the two are by no means close and friendly. With such an identity, Jining's main mission is to attack Gu Chen and make Gu Chen fall in love with him. Fortunately, the original novel has just begun, he and Gu Chen are just strangers. But for Jining, it doesn't matter if Gu Chen already hates him. Before entering this world, he has experienced 10 worlds, and the main task of each world is to let the male the Lord fell in love with him, and he has long been familiar with dealing with such things as male protagonists. What's more, compared with some perverted male protagonists, Gu Chen's character is so normal to very cute. Recalling certain things from the past, Jining's expression was neutral and there was a haze, but he quickly covered it up. After a while, the door of the aircraft was knocked from outside, and the staff came to inform them that the venue had been set up, and they could go over to prepare for filming. The grey sky was covered with dark clouds, rolling down, looking oppressive and heavy, but whether it was a dark sky or a cold temperature, it was simulated by a holographic instrument. What they will be shooting is a ghost movie called Ghost Shadows. The current supernatural theme is very popular. If the filming is good, it will be very popular, and the cost of this kind of film is not high, so it is suitable for newcomers to star in. The other actors in the film are newcomers with no background, and they had no chance to act, but this film is rarely seen. Because the old house used in this film is a real haunted house. Many years ago, there was a horrific case of extermination in the old house. A family of 6 died tragically in the house. The bodies were mutilated and scattered. The murderer committed suicide on the spot. No one knows what the murderer's motive was for killing the family and swallowing the flesh and blood of the dead. Most people speculate that the murderer had a feud with the deceased's family, or some kind of sinister ceremony, which cast a shadow on this massacre. Terrible shadow. It is precisely because of this reason that Gu Chen was able to get this shooting opportunity, and used it as an opportunity to shine. As for Jining, his character in the novel is an arrogant and indifferent genius. Although he is here to make a ghost movie, he doesn't believe in ghosts at all, and Jining himself is not afraid at all. Ghost, he had traveled through the infinitely flowing world of novels, where there were ghosts everywhere. Even then, Jining's own identity was a ghost, and he had already trained it. This is the famous haunted house. Jining and a few others walked with the staff to the vicinity of the haunted house, when a gust of cold wind suddenly blew around, causing the old wind chimes hanging under the eaves to make a ding-dong sound, which made other people's faces a little bit involuntarily white, muttered in a low voice. You can get used to it in the neighborhood first. After 15 minutes, we will start shooting on time. When the countdown is over, please start preparing, thank you." The staff smiled at them and slowly backed away. Only Jining and others were left near the old house. Several newcomers chatted in a low voice, discussing the murder case of that year. Jining folded his arms and said nothing, and Gu Chen was also unpopular because the original owner of his body was hacked by the whole network, and he was alone. "Stand aside." Jinning's eyes swept over Gu Chen. Even though he was pushed out, Gu Chen remained calm, ignoring the attitudes of others, and looked at the old mansion intently. After a while, Gu Chen pulled out a transparent light panel from the miniature terminal attached to his wrist, showing the internal structure of the old house. His slender fingers slid across the light panel, zooming in on several of the rooms from time to time, seems to be compared with the content of the script. As an actor, Gu Chen's attitude towards filming is absolutely impeccable, and so is Jining's own character. Not the slightest mistake. So naturally, Jining also recalled his own script from the terminal, and using this as an opportunity, he was finally able to say the first sentence to Gu Chen. "You're not bad." Jining walked over to Gu Chen and said indifferently. When Gu Chen raised his head, he deliberately showed a slightly sarcastic look, glanced at the other actors who were chatting, and said, "At least a lot better than the rambunctious amateurs." Other people's faces changed slightly when they heard the words. Of course, they had worked the script before they came here, but just because of a few small talk, Jining was labeled as sloppy attitude. How can they be convinced? Because Jining is a senior, and his reputation is much louder than them, they dare not speak out, so they have to put away their laughter and read the script with their heads down. Jining silently apologized to them in the bottom of her heart, but she still maintained an indifferent expression. After all, he couldn't destroy his character. Gu Chen didn't answer, just smiled at Jining. He has a handsome appearance, his dark pupils are as deep as night, his black hair is falling, his eyes are cold. When he is not smiling, he is calm, and when he smiles, he is extraordinarily gentle, revealing a unique temperament. Jining didn't go on talking. After nodding slightly at him, he looked down at the script. The process of strategy was a long one, and now he showed his disdain for excluding Gu Chen like the others. Enough is enough, no more needs to be done. 15 minutes passed quickly, the countdown to shooting began, everyone closed the terminal and adjusted their expressions and status. The surrounding holographic projections began to change, simulating the scene of forest trees. A few crows shuttled through the forest, and the leaves made a squeak sound. Pieces of black feathers. The overall story of Ghost House is good, but the setting of the script is equally cliché. A group of adventurers are lost in the forest, and they rush when they hear a voice coming from a certain direction. After passing the past and entering this haunted house, he fell into a place of doom. Of course, now because of the existence of the central optical brain and the terminal, it is basically impossible to get lost, so the era of ghost shadows was set many years ago. In the period before the optical brain came out. In today's era of light brains, although there is a fixed script for filming, the actors have a high degree of freedom during the actual shooting, and they can play without the script. The actors are not told, in order to allow the actors to show the most real emotions and reactions as much as possible. In this case, the director's scheduling relies entirely on the miniature headphones worn by the actors. There are many invisible cameras around the actors to ensure that the actors can be photographed in all directions without missing any shots. With the director's order, Jining and others quickly entered the state and began to perform. According to the plot at the beginning of the script, everyone lost their way. The heroine heard the voice, and dragged her friends through the woods to the front of the old house. The old house looks gloomy, everyone has different opinions on whether to go in to find people, but because the weather looks bad, it has poured down in an instant, and I have concerns the people who are not able can only compromise and follow the others in. Wow! No one lives here, it's an empty house. After seeing the furnishings in the house, Gu Chen said something. There was a thick layer of dust here and there, and even the transparent glass was too dirty to see through. It was pitch black, so they had to turn on their flashlights. What's wrong? Ning asked. Look at this stain on the ground. The actress who played the heroine showed an uneasy look and pointed to the floor under her feet. Even if the dust was thick, it could not cover the dark traces, and it appeared dark brown under the reflection of the flashlight. Like blood. Everyone stopped moving, their eyes fell on the stain. Jining stepped forward with a solemn expression, leaned over and touched the dark stain with her fingers. This is a human figure. Around it, there are also dragging bloodstains, blood droplets dripping down in a string, and splattered blood. As more terrifying bloodstains emerged on the ground, the expressions of the group all changed. Although they don't know what happened to this house, it's obvious they can't stay here for long. Go. Jining picked up her things, got up and ran towards the door of the house. They didn't completely close the door when they entered, but now no matter how Jining pulled the door handle, the door still remained motionless. The window won't open. This laughter appeared without warning, ethereal, and gently fell into the ears, causing the hearts of those present to jump. They were indeed frightened. The script did mention that there would be laughter at this time, but it clearly said that it belonged to a female voice. The first ghost to appear was the hostess of this house. Ghost? But now, why does it seem like a man's laughter? Did the director change the script? Jining also had the same question in his heart. This was a change that did not appear in the original book, but the earphones remained silent and no new instructions came, so everyone continued as originally planned. Go on. Crash. Just as they appeared to be terrified because they couldn't get out of the house, an old newspaper suddenly fell from above and landed on Jining's hand. Ning Ji was slightly startled, holding this newspaper. The paper was already yellowed, stained with blood, and the handwriting was blurred, only the obituary in the middle remained clear. The black and white photo on the obituary is of a young man with beautiful eyebrows. He looked ahead, his curved pupils were smiling, as if he was naturally gentle and affectionate, but if he stared into his eyes, he would be horrified to find that he was not looking at the camera, but it was looking at the man holding the newspaper. He was watching Jining. Jining's pupils suddenly shrank. Impossible, how did this person's photo appear here? Pop! Scarlet blood dripped onto the black and white photo of the obituary, just in front of the young man's chest, staining his white shirt blood red. He said, Ning Ning, I finally found you. The text of the obituary turned blood red, and a name appeared faintly. Huo Wuling. Huo Wuling. The moment she saw the name, Jining's fingers trembled, unable to restrain the horror in her heart, as if her hand was burned, she threw the newspaper out. This is not his acting, but his most real reaction, because he knows that this is most likely not a holographic projection created by the crew for filming, but something is really coming. Huo Wuling found him. He is one of the targets that Jining has attacked, the male protagonist of the Infinite Stream novel God Killing. In that world, Jining, as a ghost raised by Huo Wuling, has a relationship with Huo Wuling. They have been together for 3 whole years. So Jining knew Huo Wuling's character very well. He knew that his amorous appearance concealed extreme cruelty, and he also knew how much he hated betrayal. However, when he left that world, Jining died in ashes as he betrayed Huo Wuling. It is conceivable that if he fell into Huo Wuling's hands, he would definitely be waiting for him. A more terrifying ending than death. The incident only happened in a flash. Jining had no mental preparation, nor did he think of a way to escape. This is an entertainment novel with a very low risk factor. Seal, in front of Huo Wuling, he has no resistance, and even escape is an extravagant hope. But how did Huo Wuling find him? Although Huo Wuling has the power bestowed by the Lord God and can travel to and from multiple horror worlds, God Killing and Rebirth of the Star Actor are 2 planes, which should be completely incommunicable. Wow, The newspaper fell lightly, and the dazzling blood red on the black and white photo continued to spread, like the blood gurgling from the wound, spread to the floor, and there was a strong smell. Only Jining knew how terrifying this was. Everyone else thought it was the director's sudden change of the script. Gu Chen frowned slightly, looking at the newspaper. He suddenly felt a little different, as if something very evil was dormant in the newspaper. The next moment, he suddenly disappeared from the obituary without any warning. Zi Ka, the miniature earphone suddenly made a harsh noise, so sharp that it seemed to pierce the eardrum, so that everyone did not care whether they were still shooting, and hurriedly took off the earphone, and there was a burst of pain in the ear. Pop, pop. Then something fell one after another and hit the ground. They leaned over and touched it, and it turned out to be an invisible camera dropped in the air. What's wrong? The bad atmosphere quickly fermented, and the actor who played the heroine turned pale and murmured, "Could it be true? Yes, yes." Her voice stopped abruptly. Because within her line of sight, a translucent figure suddenly appeared. This is a very young black-haired man. He is tall, his skin is morbidly pale, wearing a neat white shirt, his facial features are beautiful. He smiled at her, obviously so gentle. However, she exuded a bit of death and gloom for no reason, which made her feel cold all over, as if a basin of ice water had been poured into her. The man in the obituary. Only this thought flashed in her mind, and then her eyes darkened, she passed out, and fell to the ground. Not only her, but others also quickly fell into a coma. Gu Chen supported his forehead, as if resisting the dizziness, and looked at the black-haired man a few more times, but he also unable to hold back, he closed his eyes. In the old mansion, only Jining and the black-haired man were standing. The man frowned, seemed very happy, and said gently, "Long time no see, Ning Ning." Huo Wuling, he really appeared. The real person appeared in front of her eyes, and the impact was stronger than the photo. Even if you pretend to be dizzy or don't know Huo Wuling now, it's too late. Huo Wuling has seen all his previous reactions, which is obviously different from others. This was enough danger to make him fail the mission and die. Jining didn't want to sit still like this. He forced himself to calm down and looked at Huo Wuling, but suddenly found Huo Wuling's figure faintly glowing transparent, not his real body. This is just the projection of Huo Wuling, he himself is not in this world. Understanding this, Jining relaxes a little. He knows Huo Wuling's ability. This projection will not last long, it will dissipate quickly. As long as he is not killed by Huo Wuling before that, death was enough. He just wanted to live. Long time no see. How did you find me? Jining tried to keep her tone calm so as not to irritate Huo Wuling. It's a secret, but you can guess. Huo Wuling's projection became a little more transparent, but he was not in a hurry, as if he had no plans to kill Jining immediately. He smiled, looked at Jining carefully, and said, "Looks like you're having a good time, but..." Different from his gentle smile, his eyes were cold and deep, like a cold tide in the dark. He said softly, "I'm not happy because I'm not having a good time." Very bad. Jining was horrified for a moment, then the illusory figure suddenly appeared in front of him, stretched out cold and pale fingers, outlining the outline of Jining's eyebrows. "I know you're not dead, you just ran away from me and left me. After you gouge out half of my heart. Are you happy, Ning Ning?" Huo Wuling's hand gradually slipped, took Jining's hand, and pressed it on his chest irresistibly. Jining didn't answer. Huo Wuling held his hand, feeling his body temperature, still just smiling. When only a thin afterimage remained, he finally leaned forward. He dropped a kiss on Jining's forehead. "When the time is up, I will come to you again, Ning Ning. See you next time." Crash! Huo Wuling's projection completely disappeared. Jining put down his hand, and a clear black fingerprint appeared on his wrist, which was the position Huo Wuling held just now. He lowered his head and stood there for a few seconds, suddenly took a deep breath, sat down on the ground immediately, held his forehead, and murmured with lingering fear, what can I do? After experiencing so many worlds, Huo Wuling, the protagonist that Jining doesn't want to get along with, definitely ranks in the top 3, because this guy's personality is too distorted. He won't take him seriously. The toy killed instantly, but the other party will gradually fall into the deepest despair, tortured to death little by little. And now Huo Wuling's target is obviously him. Jining grabbed her hair, her expression slightly bitter. He could only betray Huo Wuling according to the original plot, and then immediately disappeared. Even if they meet now, he can't explain the reason for his betrayal to Huo Wuling, because the rule is that the transmigrator can't reveal anything about the system to the original characters. Betrayed by the one she loves, and half of her heart gouged out, Jining can no longer imagine how desperate and hated Huo Wuling would be at that time. If he expected today, he must have made up some reasons in advance, but now it is too late. Who would have expected Huo Wuling to find him in another world? This should have been completely impossible. He actually chased him here. How did he do it? Kill, next time, will Huo Wuling still find him? Thinking of this, Jining's face is not good. She intends to communicate with her own system, and the system will confirm what the problem is. But at this time, the people who fainted on the ground were all showing signs of awakening. Seeing this, Jining had to adjust his state first, showing a little frightened expression on his face, pretending that he had just woken up. Gu Chen, who opened his eyes first, sat up on the ground, frowning slightly because of the discomfort. He looked around and saw that Jining was also awake, so he said to him in a hoarse voice, "Just now, what happened?" Jining pretended not to know, frowned, and shook her head. The other actors who were sober also reacted blankly, not knowing what happened. They only remembered that the signal was not good, and then they suddenly lost awareness. What's happening? We just encountered something very strange. An actor picked up the earphones that had fallen on the ground and briefly reported to the director. A sharp sound. It's earthquake warning. The warning issued by Guangnao will be issued 1 minute before the earthquake, which is enough for them to escape, but this time there was an unexpected situation. In just a few seconds, the ground and walls began to vibrate violently. Boom boom. The furniture placed around fell one after another, the glassware shattered, the old crystal lamp hanging high in the sky also made a creaking sound, the rusty iron chain it broke with a slap and smashed towards Gu Chen below. Be careful! When Gu Chen realized that there was a heavy object falling from above, he was shocked. He suddenly felt a force behind him and pushed him sharply, letting him escape from the shadow. Gu Chen turned around in astonishment, and saw the crystal lamp rubbing against Jining's side, slammed into the floor with a bang, and the iron lamp pole scratched. He broke his arm, and blood spurted out instantly. Due to the damage of the earthquake, the interior of the old house has changed beyond recognition in just a few seconds, but the earthquake came and went quickly. When several actors rolled when he crawled to the door and fled to the door, the shaking stopped quickly. Who? Several people were in shock. They walked out of the door staggeringly, and stood in the open space panting, but at this moment they suddenly found that there were 2 people missing. It was Jining and Gu Chen. The two haven't come out yet. What happened to them? Several people nervously turned their heads and looked inside the door, just to see Gu Chen supporting the blood-stained Jining to come out. You are... Senior Ji was injured by a chandelier in order to save me. Gu Chen pursed his lips, his handsome face was covered with dark clouds. He was obviously blaming himself. He lowered his eyes and apologized to him. I'm sorry, I'm the one who caused you. It's just bruises, don't put on an expression like I'm dying. Jining clutched her bleeding forearm, her expression was indifferent, and her tone was calm. In fact, he wanted to cry in pain, but for the sake of character design, he had to grit his teeth to support it. The degree of restoration of the role-playing is closely related to whether the mission can be completed or not. Perhaps an insignificant omission may lead to the failure of the mission. Jining cannot allow such a situation to happen to himself. Naturally, because of the mission, Jining will definitely do a lot of things that don't exist in the original book. For example, he never rescued Gu Chen in Rebirth of the Star Actor, but this is a controllable variable. He will definitely make his behavior logical, and the resulting changes will also develop for the better. But it really hurts. Jinning's hand that was clutching his forearm tightened slightly. Thinking of the earthquake just now, he felt a little heavier. There was no earthquake in the original book. At that time, Gu Chen successfully completed the filming without so many twists and turns, so he doubted that the earthquake was caused by Huo Wuling. Caused by? Fortunately, he responded in time and pushed Gu Chen away. Although he was scratched, on the other hand, he was saving his life. Feelings will definitely improve. Is it really just a scratch? After hearing Jining's explanation, several actors looked at the blood all over his body with pale faces, some hard to believe that his injuries were not serious, but his indifferent expression didn't seem like a fake. It is now, but not if it continues. Jining glanced at them and said coldly, I want to go back to the crew to treat the wound. If you still want to stay in this dangerous area, feel free to do so, I won't accompany you. He raised his uninjured hand and touched Gu Chen, and said unceremoniously, help me back. Gu Chen glanced at him sideways, nodded obediently and gently supported Jining towards the direction of the crew. Several others came to their senses and immediately followed. Looking at the back of Jining in front of them, while they were afraid of what happened just now, they also began to have different views on Jining. Save people? They thought he must be dismissive of everyone else. The crew quickly sent an aircraft to pick them up. Seeing that Jining was injured and bleeding so much, the crew were frightened, and while helping him deal with the injury, they apologized repeatedly. There was negligence in their preparations, for which they have an inescapable responsibility. The director quickly contacted the doctor at the medical station. After the doctor arrived, in order to check and treat, he first carefully cut off Jining's blood-stained sleeve, revealing a long and hideous blood mouth. Looking at the wound, everyone felt a little numb in their scalps, and only felt that their arms also seemed to hurt. It was Jining who had an irrelevant expression, and said lightly, please help me recover as soon as possible, thank you. Please rest assured. The medicines of the interstellar age are all efficient and convenient. After Jining took the medicine, he sprayed a layer of medicine mist on the sterilized arm to form a medicine film, and the wound below it started to heal slowly. The spray is sprayed every hour, except the one just now, there are 3 more. There was an earthquake on the set, and today's filming will naturally be suspended. On the way back, after the treatment, the doctor said to others, fortunately, it is only a skin injury, rest for a night, and it will be cured tomorrow. Already? Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. We will arrive at the hotel in 20 minutes. The staff looked at the time displayed on the terminal and asked Jining, Mr. Jining, do you need us to give you medicine later? If possible, I hope I can help. Gu Chen said, Senior Ji was injured to save me. I haven't had time to express my apology and gratitude to my senior. I hope you can give me a chance. If it was someone else, Jining would simply say that she was here. Anyway, it was just spraying the medicine, but when Gu Chen spoke, he had no reason not to agree, so he just gave him a sideways glance and turned his head. Propped his jaw and said indifferently, as you wish. Thank you. Although Jining's attitude was cold, Gu Chen didn't care. Instead, a smile appeared on the corners of his lips, and his handsome eyebrows suddenly became gentle. Forget about the fact that Jining saved his life, he couldn't possibly hate Jining, and he had already seen that Jining had a good temperament, but he often said nothing sincere. After being reborn, the body he acquired was completely squeezed out. Although he didn't care about other people's opinions, Jining's initiative to talk to him earlier still made him feel a little bit about Jining. Feel good. Even Jining saved him. It wasn't until he saw the blood on Jining's body that Gu Chen realized what had happened, and his heart throbbed instantly. Feeling scared and happy, Jining then pretended to be indifferent and covered the wound, but Gu Chen was keenly aware that his fingertips were shaking, maybe because of pain, maybe because of fear, but no matter what the reason made Gu Chen quickly understand that Jining was not as indifferent as he seemed on the surface, but hid his inner emotions deeply. Even letting a few actors take care of them was a subtle reminder of the dangers of staying where they were. Thinking of this, Gu Chen shook his head slightly. He was used to seeing people with different words and deeds, but all of them were the type with exquisite faces and hidden knives in their smiles. Like Jining, he deliberately showed a cold face. It's really rare to hide your kindness. What a lovely character, but if he said that, Jining would definitely be very angry. Looking at Jining's indifferent expression, the corners of Gu Chen's lips tended to rise again. Seeing that he didn't want to be disturbed anymore, he went to another lounge in the aircraft with the others and stayed there. Next, Jining rested quietly. He is not in a hurry to repay Jining's kindness. It will be a long time in Japan. This may also be an opportunity. He also wants to develop a deeper relationship with Jining, such as becoming friends. This is the first time since his rebirth want to open up and meet someone. The lounge was quiet. Jining leaned on the soft sofa, closed his eyes, and seemed to be resting, but in fact, he connected the system in his consciousness and gave feedback about Huo Wuling's problems. "Hello, Jining, what do you need this time?" The cold male voice with a metallic tone asked this question. He is Jining's exclusive system, called Future, and is responsible for assisting Jining in completing tasks in various worlds, but unless Jining calls him, he doesn't show up. Huo Wuling suddenly appeared just now. He came to me, I may be killed by him. Jining said, he is the protagonist of other novels and should not appear here. Is there a loophole in your operation? If so, please fix this loophole immediately, and during this period return my strength, at least give me the ability to protect myself. Understood, I will give feedback to the superior, and there will be a special person to check the situation and solve the abnormal problem as soon as possible. Future said, but the current situation is not enough to lift the seal of your power. Isn't this kind of thing already affected when Huo Wuling appeared, or how did the earthquake just now come about? Jining thought so, and asked patiently, how long will it take them to solve it? The time is unknown, it is estimated that it will take about a week. No, that's too long. Jining opened her eyes immediately after hearing it. A week? At that time, he was afraid that even the corpse would be cold, and the premise was that Huo Wuling could leave him a corpse. Silent for a few seconds in the future, and said, I will apply for you to unblock, but the possibility of being approved is almost zero, because there is no conclusive evidence to prove that it is our problem. Jining also knew that the unblocking was not worth mentioning in the future, but he was still a little unwilling and asked, but if this is your problem, then I will die at the hands of Huo Wuling. Isn't it wrong? His appearance is an accidental factor. If you are killed by him, I have the right to apply to the superior to resurrect you. Future said, also please be careful, Jining. Resurrection after death? Resurrection where? Shouldn't he be resurrected directly under Huo Wuling's eyelids and continue to suffer that inhuman torture? Hearing what the future said, Jining was very helpless, but he also knew that there was really no other way now, but to cut off the connection with the future. Now his only hope is that the system operator can solve the problem as soon as possible, or get the approval of the force to unblock, otherwise his life safety will really be a problem. At this time, there was a knock on the door. It was Gu Chen who came to inform Jining that he had arrived at the hotel where they lived. He helped Jining get off the aircraft and took him back to the room. I'll give you medicine in a while, you need a good rest. Gu Chen smiled gently at Jining, then left the room. Jining stood in the room, tugging at her blood-stained clothes, thinking about how she should change it, but suddenly heard a beep. The automatic sunroof did not know come out what kind of fault, it opened a gap on its own without him starting. Could it be that Huo Wuling came back so soon? Ning's expression changed, and soon she saw a small bat flying into the window, flapping its wings, flying towards him. This little bat gave Jining a very familiar feeling. A guess flashed through his mind in an instant, and the bat had already flown in front of him. Shoo! A breeze blew towards him, the bat disappeared in midair, replaced by a black figure. A black gloved hand stretched out from the cloak, and gently held Jining's finger. This is a young man, his long jet black hair draped over his shoulders. It slipped slightly as he lowered his head, and then Jining felt a cold kiss fall on the back of his hand. Intense joy, whispered Jining. Seeing the bat suddenly transform into a young and handsome man, Jining did not deliberately hide her emotions, showing a look of shock, then took a few steps back with full of alertness, and asked, "Who are you?" The man was slightly startled, did not answer his question immediately. Staring at him became more complicated, gently closed the dark red pupil, and opened it slowly after a while, softly murmured, "You don't remember me?" He looked at the blood on Jining's body again, frowned, his expression suddenly turned cold, and asked in a cold voice, "Who hurt you? Please leave my room immediately." Jining's face was sinking, she raised the terminal on her wrist, "If you don't leave, I will call." However, his voice suddenly stopped at this time, his expression changed, the blood on his face faded instantly, fine cold sweat oozes out of his forehead, he groaned, grabbed the fabric in front of his chest, shaky he fell to the ground with a painful expression on his face. Jining! The black cloak rolled over a wave in the air, and the man came to Jining in an instant, reaching out and hugging him into his arms. But at this time, Jining's consciousness was quickly blurred by torture. Leaning weakly against the man's arms, only one thought appeared over and over again: why is there a blood contract between them? He knew where the pain came from. It was the effect of the blood contract. In a previous world, he was forced to make a blood contract by the man in front of him. If he can't get a man's blood on time, he will be in extreme pain and even lose his mind, desperately craving the only blood that can save him. Harry knows. In fact, the moment she saw the bat, Jining knew who was coming. There was already a precedent for Hua Wooling's appearance, and Jining immediately realized that this might be Harry's. I didn't have time to think about why another male protagonist appeared. This time, Jining didn't show any flaws, and decisively decided that he would pretend to have amnesia and pretend that he didn't know Harry's. The reason why he did this was because in that world, his relationship with Harry's was very distorted. As a vampire hunter, the character played by Ning hated all the vampires, and till later, he was also imprisoned by Harry's, and he hated Harry's to the core. It would be troublesome and meaningless to continue playing a character like this. Of course, Jining would not do such a thing. He was reincarnated, and Harry's harbored deep guilt for him and would definitely not do anything to harm him. However, after all the calculations, Jining still did not expect that the blood pact between him and Harry's still existed, and was triggered again after they met, causing Jining to immediately fall into a violent in pain and longing. Since then, Harry's has absolute control over Jining. Whenever the blood pact breaks out, Jining will instinctively want to surrender to Harry's, as if standing in front of him was his god, which made his soul tremble. This kind of feeling is very bad for Jining. After leaving the world of blood novels, he is very happy. Renos, the blood pact will actually take effect in another world. It's really unfortunate. Why does Harry's also appear in this world? It has been a long time since the last blood pact attack, and now it has accumulated into a one-time outbreak. Even if he was immediately fed blood by Harry's, Jining's body could not support it, and soon just fainted. When Jining opened his eyes again, he found himself lying on the bed, and the scene in his sight was his hotel room, proving that he was not taken elsewhere. Jining sat up slowly from the bed. The residual effect of the blood pact made him a little dizzy, and there was still a trace of blood in his mouth, but there was no urge to thirst for blood. It seems to have passed this blood contract attack. He looked down at his body, and found that his blood-stained clothes had been changed, and the wound on his arm had healed a lot. This must have been done by Harry Nose for him. Wow! At this time, there was a sound of water in the bathroom, which caught his attention and looked up subconsciously. The room is empty now, and there is no sign of Harry Nose. It should be Harry Nose in the bathroom. Why does he take a shower? Jining didn't know the reason, but suddenly his expression became strange, because he realized that there were some memories in his brain that didn't belong to him. As a blood prince, Harry Nose has the ability to suggest, which can modify human memory and thoughts, and now these extra false memories are added by Harry Nose during his coma. Jining has the identity of a traverser and does not belong to these worlds. His memory is protected by the system to prevent the memory of related tasks from flowing out, and at the same time, it will not be modified. His ability to suggest is useless to him. However, he did read the memory by Harry Nose, because Harry Nose wanted to reasonably shape the new memory according to his previous experience, but the memories read by him were also made by it's just a fake memory created by the system. In the memory created by Harry Nose, he was a good friend of Jining. The two had a very good relationship. Jining also knew that Harry Nose was a vampire disguised as a human, but he didn't care. Obviously arrogant and cold, but only shows a soft side in front of Harry Nose. They are all vampires over 1,000 years old. Can you point your face? Jining looked at the bathroom blankly. In the false memory, Harry Nose will appear here because he heard the news of Jining's injury, so he hurried to visit the class, and he wants to live here. Jining knew what Harry Nose was doing, and probably planned to stay by his side in the future, so he had to fabricate a false identity for himself. Because he pretended to have amnesia, Harry Nose had already determined that he was the reincarnation of the past, and the past was gone, and everything had a chance to start again, and Harry Nose naturally would not miss it. Fortunately, this guy has a bottom line. He didn't frantically create a false memory that they were lovers. Jining thought for a while, and felt that this was a good thing, because Harry Nose was by his side, which meant that his safety was greatly guaranteed. Hua Wuling wanted to treat him. Getting started is never that easy. And he was originally worried that Hua Wuling could travel between two different novels, what special ability he got, but now it seems that Harry Nose also suddenly appeared here, which means that it is very likely it's just that there is a loophole on the system operator's side. As long as the loophole is fixed, Hua Wuling and Harry Nose will both return to their original world. As long as they can be sent back, the problem of the blood contract will be solved naturally. When he and Harry Nose are in a different world, this thing will not happen. However, during this period, he may have to slow down the strategy of Gu Chen, and hook up with other men under the eyes of Harry Nose. I am afraid that he will not have to wait for Hua Wuling to come. Harry Nose will kill him first. Boom boom. The sound of water splashing in the bathroom stopped, and at the same time there was a knock on the door from outside. Gu Chen should have come to help him with medicine. Come here. Ning secretly muttered something in her heart, but she still gave permission to the light brain system in the room and put Gu Chen in the room. He should be glad that he and Gu Chen just met now, otherwise if their relationship is ambiguous, he will be fine, but Gu Chen may be in danger. Senior. Outside the door was Gu Chen's handsome face. He smiled at Jining, walked into the room, picked up the healing spray on the table and asked, "How is it now? Feeling better?" Jining got up from the bed, nodded slightly to Gu Chen, thought about it, and said, "You can go back to rest, someone will help me with medicine." Although he wanted to have a good relationship with Gu Chen right away, some touching actions were inevitable when taking the medicine. He was worried that if Harry Nose saw him, he would notice Gu Chen. After all, this is a very jealous vampire. Gu Chen heard the words, opened the spray for a while, and asked, "Senior, did you ask someone to help?" Jining shook her head, and before she could explain, the bathroom door opened with a swoosh. Harry Nose was wearing a burgundy silk bathrobe, showing her chest slightly, with a trace of hair at the ends wet, came out from the inside. A bit of a strange aura, but still extremely beautiful. When he saw Gu Chen, he first raised his eyebrows, then walked to Jining's side, and hugged his shoulder from the uninjured arm, and said with a smile that was not a smile on his face, "Little one." "Ning, who is he?" Being held by Hairy Nose in his arms, Gu Chen looked over at the same time, and Jining suddenly realized a problem. If he doesn't want to reveal that he does not have amnesia, he must act according to the memory shaped by Hairy Nose. He is indifferent to others, but he is only good to this good friend. He shouldn't worry about what Hairy Nose will misunderstand. What he should worry about is whether Gu Chen will misunderstand something. But now he has to pretend that he has been hinted by Hairy Nose. Of course he will not do so to his only friend. So Jining just showed a helpless look, pushed Hairy Nose's hand on her shoulder, and said, "There are still people there." "Senior, who is this gentleman?" Gu Chen smiled and nodded at Hairy Nose, as a greeting. From his expression, Jining could not tell what emotion he was in now. After all, as a former actor, as long as he had need, Gu Chen's expression control has always been perfect. "I'm his friend. He's Gu Chen, the actor I'm partnering with, and he's here to help me get medicine." Jining raised her injured arm, without mentioning the fact that she was injured to save Gu Chen, and said to Gu Chen, "His name is Hairy Nose, it's me friend. I'm here to help seniors with medicine, and this is also my responsibility. It's because of you." Hearing his words, Hairy Nose's smile immediately faded a little, his eyes were deep, and he said indifferently, "Do you think the medicine is enough to repay?" "Of course not." Gu Chen shook his head, his tone was gentle and sincere, making it hard to feel disgusted. "After the filming is over, I will thank Senior Ji again." So he looked at Jining with a gentle smile between his brows and eyes. He pointed to his terminal and said, "If Senior doesn't mind, I would like to exchange terminal numbers with you so that we can contact you in the future." "I don't think it's necessary. I know your friend's injury will make you unhappy, but," Gu Chen said, "I think what I want to ask is Senior Ji's opinion, not someone else's." "Oh." Hairy Nose laughed instead, as if he had heard something very interesting. "I really rarely get ignored. Even if they do, they tend to change their minds later on enough." Faced with the atmosphere that was gradually becoming inexplicably tense, Jining had no other choice but to raise her injured hand and said blankly, "No one can help me with medicine." The other two fell silent immediately. "Sorry. Sorry." The result was that Jining and Gu Chen exchanged terminal contact numbers, and then Gu Chen left, and Hairy Nose helped Jining to spray. Jining stretched out his hand and let Hairy Nose roll up his sleeves, then took his fingers in one hand and the spray bottle in the other, and sprayed the medicine mist on the long wound that begins to scab over. Hairy Nose returned to the appearance of a blood race, and now lowered his head, his long black hair slipped down, slightly covering his face, and his pale and slender fingers stroked the skin on the side of the wound gently. The seriousness of his gaze always made Jining wonder if he wanted to take a bite while taking the medicine. But the blood prince doesn't seem to have any desire to blood now. He just sprayed the medicine mist, helped Jining tidy up his sleeves, and got up and took the medicine away. "Thank you." Jining tried to wave his arm. He had to say that the medicine in the future was magical. In his world, a severe cut would definitely require stitches. Just a few sprays. Hearing his thanks, Hairy Nose smiled, "Do you still need to be so polite with me? You wanted to attack Gu Chen just now." Ning would not be polite to him, but he saw the red light in Hairy Nose's eyes. In human form, it would only be revealed with the use of strength. Hairy Nose was silent again. "I will save him" has nothing to do with him, but I will save anyone. Although he knew it would make Hairy Nose unhappy, but since he had a suitable reason, Jining thought it was necessary for him to say so that even if Hairy Nose intended to target Gu Chen, don't do too much either. He's just a normal person, don't use your powers on him. Jining said these words in a serious tone. He looked into Hairy Nose's eyes, and said solemnly, "Hairy Nose, I don't want you to do this, because I take you as my friend." "Good." After a moment of silence, Hairy Nose sighed, rubbed Jinning's hair and said, "Since you say so, then I promise that I will not use my power on him." After he finished speaking, he added, "The premise is that he didn't hurt you." Jinning smiled lightly, "Thank you, Hairy Nose." Seeing Jinning smiling at him, Hairy Nose was startled, his eyes softened, he reached out and hugged Jinning gently, put his head on his shoulder, closed his eyes and murmured, "As long as you're here." Hearing what he said, Jinning suddenly felt a little guilty, because he didn't tell Hairy Nose the truth, and even stayed by his side just to avoid being killed by Hua Wuling. That's it for Renos. However, Ning did not tell Hairy Nose what happened to Hua Wuling today, because this memory and system were related to time travel. If he didn't read it, if he mentioned it casually, Hairy Nose would definitely be suspicious. It seems that we can only wait until Hua Wuling appears next time. Thinking like this, Jinning was calm on the surface, still abiding by the character of this world. Even if he was injured, he had to call up the script from the terminal to review his scenes until the time was up in the evening. Hairy Nose asked him to have a good rest, and then he closed the terminal and went to sleep. Hairy Nose, as a blood clan, actually does not need sleep at night, but he said that he and Jinning had not seen each other for a long time, and planned to sleep with Jinning tonight, so he followed Jinning's schedule. The hotel provides large beds, which are more than enough for even 2 adults to lie on. Ning also wished to be by Hairy Nose's side 24 hours a day, and naturally he would not object. When he rested, the wound on Jinning's arm had healed, and it would not affect his sleep. Although Jinning's body was very tired after experiencing a lot of things today, but perhaps because the mental shock was too strong, Jinning didn't feel sleepy, and she didn't fall asleep after lying down for a long time. He knew that Hairy Nose, who was lying beside him, hadn't slept, but kept looking at him, even though Jinning was used to facing all kinds of eyes, but in such a close he was still under pressure from the distance, and finally had to turn on sleep mode and force himself to fall asleep. However, even in sleep mode, Jinning slept very restlessly. He seemed to be in the inside of a kaleidoscope. With the rotation of the cylinder, the fragments changed their combinations and shapes, and reflected different figures and faces. Jinning stood in the darkness, stunned. Look at those people! Gradually, these fragments slowly merged together, and those hazy and illusory shadows also merged together, leaving only 2 people, Hua Wuling and Jinning, whose body is transparent like a ghost. This is the world of the infinite stream novel God Killing. Jinning is a ghost pulled by Hua Wuling from the ghost pit. When they first met, Hua Wuling was planning to raise a ghost, so he went to the ghost pit where all the ghosts in the world were imprisoned, and all of a sudden, he chose Jinning among the countless ghosts. At that time, Jinning had just entered God Killing, and was trapped in a dense crowd of ghosts. There was almost no gap to turn around, his body was torn wildly by the surrounding ghosts, almost to die in this hellish haunted pit. Until the moment Hua Wuling appeared, all the specters fell silent and looked up at him silently. At that time, Hua Wuling, who was still a teenager, was like a stroll in the courtyard, walking on the ghost pit, walking in the void. His shirt was white and clean, and he lowered his head to reveal a beautiful and affectionate face, with faint hints between his eyebrows smile. In other words, he is the radiance. The specters seem to have seen the most terrifying natural enemy, and instinctively feel the extreme danger, but they dare not even move, like a solidified white porcelain statue, standing sluggishly in place. Only Jinning saw this young man and knew that he was Hua Wuling, and immediately extended his hand towards the young man with joy, looking at him eagerly. His cold fingertips were grasped by a warm hand. "You chose me?" Hua Wuling held Jinning's hand with a smile and asked. In the dead silence of 10,000 ghosts, they looked at each other. Maybe it was a moment, maybe it was a very long time. Hua Wuling laughed lightly, slowly moving Jinning from the countless. The ghost was pulled out and let him stand beside him. "Then, as a gift, I also choose you." The boy smiled and stroked Li Gui's pale and beautiful eyebrows, kissed his forehead, and said, Promise me not to betray me. Click. Small beach. Why? You promised me then that you would not betray me. You promised me. Jining woke up suddenly from the nightmare and sat up to gasp for breath. Hairy Nose, who was sleeping beside him, opened his eyes and sat up, leaning on his shoulder and asking, "Have a nightmare?" Jining nodded, still panting. Hairy Nose poured him a glass of water, helped him drink it, and then asked with a slight frown, "So scared, do you dream what?" "Dream of a ghost." Jining was soaked in cold sweat. He calmed down for a while, lifted the quilt, got out of bed, and said to Hairy Nose, "I'll go first, take a shower and talk to you later." Huo Wuling in the mirror stretched her hand forward, her fingertips passed through the mirror, touched Jining, and suddenly grabbed his wrist. "Ning ning." He laughed. "I'm here to pick you up." The moment Huo Wuling grabbed her wrist, Jining's heartbeat stopped for a moment, especially since he had just had that nightmare. Seeing the scene at that time, now he doesn't even dare to looking at Huo Wuling in the mirror. Hairy Nose. Ning of course didn't want to be brought to the infinite world by Huo Wuling. He didn't want to die, so he did not hesitate to ask the Blood Prince outside the door for help, but he didn't get any response. Can't hear the sound outside. Jining's heart sank. He guessed that this space may have been isolated. For some reason, Huo Wuling took the initiative to let go of Jining's hand, and her figure disappeared into the mirror. The induction had failed, so he could only rely on Jining to claw the edge of the door slightly to open a gap and look out carefully. Wow! It was not the warm light in the room, but a dim white light, and the slight sound of rain, and a cool wind blew in. Jining felt something was wrong and wanted to start over again. Closing the door suddenly opened on its own. Outside the door is a quiet and dark street. The dense drizzle drips from the night sky, gathering pools of puddles on the street, and the street lights emit white flickering white. The light reflects the stagnant water a little light. The shop window was pitch black, and there was no light. Faced with such a strange scene, of course Jining didn't want to go out, but a force suddenly came from behind him, pushing him out of the door. He staggered a step and stood with his feet outside the door closed with a bang. The door panel was twisted and deformed, turning into a glass door that was no different from other shops, completely blocking Jining's way back. The cold rain fell on Jining's body, with a faint smell like blood. He stood there, knowing that he was completely trapped. Huo Wuling hadn't shown up yet. Jining knew that it was Huo Wuling who wanted to inflict mental terror on him, driving him little by little. In the fine night rain, Jining wrapped her wet pajamas tightly, pursed her lips, and suddenly began to walk slowly down the street. He knew that he had no other choice, otherwise it would be like being pushed out just now. Huo Wuling would choose for him, and it would only be worse. It doesn't matter. The worst case is just inhuman torture by Huo Wuling. As long as he finds a way to die in Huo Wuling's hands, his system future promised him that he could apply for resurrection for him. Jining calmed herself down, raised her hand to wipe the rain off her face, and began to look around, guessing what Huo Wuling wanted him to do. The lamp was swayed by the wind, and the hazy light also swayed to and fro. Jining walked towards the shop, and as he got closer, he began to hear other sounds besides the sound of rain. It was an ethereal singing, gentle and soothing, like an old records came from the open store door. He walked to the store, raised his hand to cover the rain falling in front of him, and looked at the sign of the store. The sign was too old and had lost many colors. The words "grocery store" are written on the back. Jining walked into the open door, stood under the eaves, and soon a pool of water stains accumulated under her feet. The grocery store is covered with a warm orange light everywhere. The store is not large, and there are a variety of goods everywhere, most of which are colorful glass jars, neatly placed on the storage rack on the top. A gramophone is placed in the corner, and the record turns to release a gentle and low female voice. There is something in each glass jar, like a living thing, trembling lightly. Before Jining took a closer look, she heard a light chirp from one of them. Inside the jar is a beating heart, the color is bright, you can clearly see the blood vessels all over it, and the shapes of the things stored in other glass jars are also very similar. Placed in the storage, all the jars on the shelf are full of hearts. Ah! Two dark shadows appeared. Man! You say you love me, you say you love me. The woman screamed shrilly, suddenly rushed forward and pressed the man to the ground, stabbed the sharp knife into the man's body frantically. The man fell to the ground struggling and wailing, but he counted knives in a row after that. He gradually stopped moving, and soon there was no sound, and he remained motionless. Woo, woo! The woman, who looked like a humanoid mist, let out a wailing cry, slumped beside the corpse, covered her face and wept. After a while, she raised the sharp knife again, and trembled to open the corpse's chest, took out the heart from the chest cavity. She dropped the sharp knife and held her heart in her palm, which was still beating slowly and powerfully. She staggered up and walked towards the grocery store, asking in a hoarse and trembling voice, "Is the boss there?" Jinning took a step back and looked at the dark shadow of the woman's silhouette with some fear, but the woman didn't seem to be looking for him. She even nodded politely at Jinning, and then continued to look inside, looking. "It's coming." A smiling male voice came from behind the heavy storage racks. Upon hearing this, Jinning's body tightened, but his body seemed to be embedded with nails, unable to move at all, couldn't even make any sound, and watched Huo Wuling's beautiful face behind the storage rack. Huo Wuling was still wearing a snow-white shirt, every button was neatly fastened, and the shirt was ironed straight, which made his figure more slender and straight. He smiled at the woman and asked gently, "Miss, what do you need? I'm going to deposit it with you." "No problem." Huo Wuling nodded, took out a glass jar and placed the heart on the storage shelf. When registering, he asked the woman with a smile, "How do you store this heart? What's the reason?" "His heart went bad." The woman murmured sadly. "He doesn't love me that much, so before this heart is completely broken, I'm going to save it so it doesn't rot." Huo Wuling wrote it down in the notebook. The woman stood in the store, stared at the lavender glass jar, looked for a long time, then turned and walked out of the store slowly. The mist was hazy, the figure disappeared into the air with her steps. Then, this guest, Huo Wuling closed the notebook in his hand and looked at Jinning with a smile. "What do you need me to do?" Jinning's voice was blocked, so he couldn't answer this question, but Huo Wuling didn't seem to need his answer, just curled his lips and continued. "You don't look like you're stocking or selling hearts. Need to buy? We can sell hearts too. Whose heart do you want?" He showed a gentle smile, took Jinning's hand, and led him to browse the glass jars on the storage shelf and the beating hearts inside. There are also some old posters on the wall, all in sketch style, only black and white and grey. It was him and Huo Wuling who came out here to draw. These posters depict events they have experienced before. Huo Wuling pulled him out of the pit of ghosts and fed him with his own blood. On a hot summer night, Huo Wuling hugged him like a cat and fell asleep lazily because his body was cool. He was captured by the monster in the dungeon. Huo Wuling quickly slaughtered the entire dungeon, stepping on the dirty bones and blood on the ground, but his eyebrows and eyes were clean and gentle, and he rushed again. He held out his hand. "And the last poster is like the posters." In the grocery store, Huo Wuling held Jinning's wrist, stood in front of the poster, looked at Jinning for a while, and suddenly laughed. "I see. I think you'll like it too." It was in front of Jinning. "I'll give you my heart, will you? Didn't you want it?" The female voice from the gramophone became more and more stagnant and dry, twisted into a melody. The lights around it went out instantly. "I don't know when it has become." Jinning holding this heart, and Huo Wuling, he hugged him from behind and put his hands on his chest. "In exchange, give me your heart too, Ning Ning. Let me seal it up before it rots. So, won't you leave me?" Crack. However, just as he was about to be completely engulfed by the cold, the surrounding darkness suddenly spread like a cobweb-like crack, and then shattered like a mirror. revealing the warm light and the interior of the bathroom. Structure. Jinning's fallen body was caught by a pair of powerful arms. He was dizzy and could barely see anything. He only glimpsed a pair of cold and sharp dark red pupils, and then he fainted. Hairy Nose held Jining in his arms and looked at the figure in the mirror with a dark expression. The glossy mirror surface is full of cobweb-like cracks, and Hua Wulling's body is also broken into many pieces in the mirror, and dissipates at a very fast speed. Before he disappeared completely, Hairy Nose narrowed his eyes dangerously and said with a warning. No matter who you are not allowed to approach Jining in the future. This time you won, but... Hua Wulling smiled, his eyes fell on Hairy Nose blood-dripping fingertips, and he said meaningfully. Next time we meet, I will take Ning Ning and kill you. Boom! Fell to the ground. He gently put the unconscious Jining on the bed, spread his hands, and looked at the palms. The wounds that usually disappear quickly were now glowing faintly black, without any healing trend. As if asking about Jining, she spoke in a low voice. Who is he? When Jining woke up from the coma, it was noon the next day. He sat up from the bed in a daze, first glanced at the shimmering terminal on his wrist, and saw that the crew left a message on his terminal. The main content was that the filming was suspended today. They want to confirm after the venue is safe, we will decide when to start shooting again. In addition, the director and Gu Chen also sent a message. The director said that he had come to visit Jining, but was stopped by a friend who was taking care of Jining. Greetings, Gu Chen is also in the same situation. Staring at these few messages, Jining's stagnant thoughts gradually became smooth, and before he could reply, he suddenly recalled what happened before he fainted. Hua Wulling is here again, Hairy Nose rescued him. The cold that I felt at that time seemed to still be on my heart. Jining subconsciously touched his heart, although the system future said that he could be resurrected, but he could escape from death, still makes him feel happy. However, Jining soon found that her memory was read and modified by Hairy Nose again. For some reason, Hairy Nose seemed to think that he knew Hua Wulling, or had some other doubts, so he read his memory, maybe to confirm what relationship the two of them had. At that time, Ning was in a coma and didn't know anything about it. It was the future that intercepted the reading of Hairy Nose memory and created some false memories to provide to Hairy Nose. Therefore, Hairy Nose did not find any clues from the memory he read. At least now he believed that Jining did not know Hua Wulling, so he revised Jining's memory again. The fact that Hua Wulling came here last night was erased. Ning Ji guessed that this might be because Hairy Nose cared about him and didn't want him to leave terrible memories, and Hairy Nose would secretly investigate Hua Wulling. Conversely, Hua Wulling may also secretly investigate Hairy Nose. Thinking of this, Jining called the future of the system in his consciousness, and wanted to communicate with him about the situation. Although it was unlikely, he still wanted to prevent these protagonists from knowing about novels and time travel. The investigation is ongoing, the cause of the mutation is not yet known, the only certainty is that all the planes you have experienced are merging. The voice of the future is as cold as ever. Hua Wulling and Hairy Nose will appear in this world, both are related to the phenomenon of plane fusion. You say the planes are merging. Ning Ji was slightly startled. If Hairy Nose and Hua Wulling investigated each other and found out that the other party was not from their original world, would they notice any clues? This will not happen. The future said, after the planes merge, their worlds will be distributed in different galaxies in this universe, and at most they think each other is from other galaxies. Hearing his explanation, Jining nodded, relaxed, and asked, does that mean characters from other novels may also appear? Good. Answer: in the future, the fusion of these planes and universes will lead to the confusion of time and space. The earthquake you experience is caused by plane fusion, and as the fusion deepens, it will cause more serious problems. What are the consequences of complete integration? You will be trapped in this universe, unable to return to the real world. Find a solution and may need your assistance at that time. Jining thought about it. This is not a big problem. even if the system can't find a solution to the fusion of planes, half a year is enough for him to attack Gu Chen and jump to the next world. Will not be out of this world. But if possible, he still wants to release the power seal as soon as possible. According to the future, he may meet other male protagonists at any time in the future. Although Huo Wuling is the most terrifying one, this does not mean that other male protagonists are easy to get along with, on the contrary, they are also difficult to deal with. So he asked, "Then my power seal? Since you want me to help, you should release the seal for me, right?" They rejected the first application on the grounds that the need for your assistance is only a theoretical possibility. It does not mean that this situation will inevitably happen. Answered him in the future, "I have made the next application and am waiting for a reply." I see. Jining reckons that until the operator finds out the reason, he may have no chance of obtaining approval for unblocking, and before that, he may have to rely on the power of Hairy Nose to protect himself. They said they needed a week to solve this problem, but does a week really solve it? Jining always felt that he had no confidence in this. "I will contact you at any time if there is progress," the future said. "Thank you, future." Jining responded, cutting off the connection between him and the future. Although the future is only an artificial intelligence system, the two of them have experienced so many worlds together, and the relationship is still good, and the future is also very concerned about his safety. He and the future communicated a lot in consciousness, but in reality only a few seconds later, noticing the movement of his waking up, sitting by the side watching an ancient book after closing the book, he came over and asked with concern, "How do you feel?" In the memory added by Hairy Nose, Jining woke up from a nightmare in the middle of the night and suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. She drank the healing potion and slept until now. In fact, Jining is still a little uncomfortable. This is the sequela left after being eroded by Huo Wuling's power. "It's all right." Jining shook his head and used the terminal to reply to the crew, director, and Gu Chen respectively, telling them that he was fine. "Worry, I don't worry if I don't follow you." Jining raised her head to look at him, guessing that the so-called discussion of Hairy Nose was probably a hint to others, but this was exactly what he wanted. Even if Hairy Nose didn't go, they must find a way to let him go. After that, Jining rested for another half day. In the evening, the director visited him personally to ask about his condition. After confirming that Jining was fine, the director said that it had been confirmed by the central optical brain, and it was basically impossible for him to have any more problems in the near future. The earthquake, and the studio was fully repaired and reinforced. They decided to continue filming tomorrow. Jining said there was no problem. The next morning, the cast and crew came to the wasteland early, and due to the suggestion of Hairy Nose, the others did not respond to his entourage. If there is any objection, it is natural to regard him as a member of the crew. "Senior, good morning, have you rested well these 2 days?" Gu Chen showed a smile and took the initiative to come forward to greet Jining. Even in the face of Hairy Nose cold and stern gaze, the smile on his face did not diminish at all. In front of everyone, of course, Jining will continue to act, maintaining his indifferent and arrogant persona, just nodding lightly, without saying a word, facing his attitude. Several rookie actors who wanted to say hello to him were hesitant, but Gu Chen didn't seem to mind and continued to talk to Jining. "Xiaoning, didn't you say you still need to read the script?" It's just that before they said a few words, Hairy Nose suddenly put his arms around Jining's shoulders, and turned his position a bit, just turned his back to Gu Chen, blocking his eyes. Ning naturally couldn't refuse, slightly raised the corners of her lips and nodded. This seems to be the first time they see Jining smiling. After all, they are filming a horror movie, and there is no occasion to smile before. The two of them have a great relationship. The newcomers gathered together and muttered a few words, but it was not loud, but it fell into Gu Chen's ears. Gu Chen's expression did not change, but he lowered his eyelashes, looked away from the sight of the two people leaning against each other, and quickly turned his body over. After the preparation time, the filming of Ghost Shadow began again in the old house. The actors took their places in the holographic simulated forest outside the old house, and the crew also gathered at the remote. The location of the old house is very close to prevent the last accident. Harry Nose also appeared in the crew with his hinting ability, and watched the feedback from the camera with the director. As for the exposure to sunlight, it had no effect on him. As a prince-level vampire, the sun has almost no damage to him. The pictures captured in the previous film were completely destroyed due to the failure of the invisible camera. The film had to be shot from the beginning, and without Hua Wooling, the shooting this time was very smooth, everything was as it should be conduct. In the film, they were chased by the ghosts and died one by one. In the end, only the three characters played by Jining, Gu Chen, and the heroine were left. Actually, according to the original script of Ghost Shadows, there was no role played by Gu Chen. He should have died a long time ago, but Gu Chen's performance in the previous series of shots it was very good, so the director specially revised the script for Gu Chen. The director did not inform the actress and Jining of the revised script, but since Jining had read the entire book Rebirth of the Star Actor and knew that Gu Chen was the protagonist of the novel, of course he would shine, and he also knew that Gu Chen would play the final boss who was possessed by a ghost. Haha, haha. Chased by ghosts, the three of them ran to the dark basement, blocked the door, sprinkled a circle of salt that they had just desperately got, and blocked the chasing ghosts outside the door. In the painted salt circle, both Ning and the heroine felt at ease and sat down tiredly, because they knew that ghosts could not cross this line. According to the content of the script, Ning lowered her head and gasped violently. The oil lamp they found in the middle of the darkness was emitting a faint light, the flame was trembling, and it was so fragile that it seemed that the next moment off. At this time, Jining was a little nervous, and his back was a little tight, because he had read the original book and knew that the next scene was that Gu Chen's Li Gui would suddenly reveal his true face and use a knife to ruthlessly he stabbed hard into his body. Although the knife in Gu Chen's hand was simulated by a holographic projection, in order to achieve a realistic effect, the projection would also simulate a certain pain on Jining's body, and he was still a little afraid of pain. It's almost time. Jin Ning counted down the time in her heart, and tightened her fingers slightly to grab the fabric of her clothes to prevent herself from subconsciously dodging the knife, but before he was fully prepared, she suddenly heard pft sounded softly. It was the sound of a knife stabbing into the body, but not from him. Jin Ning was surprised. As soon as she raised her head, blood was sprayed on her face. The girl's expression was still a little dull, and she was stabbed in the chest, just like that silently fell to the ground. The handsome man looked down at him, moved his fingers, gently wiped the blood on his face, and said with a smile. Finally, get you. At this moment, Jining's instinctive reaction was not that the script of the movie had changed, but that Hua Wooling appeared in front of him again, and this realization made his spirit instantly tense. But immediately he heard the director's instructions coming from the headset. The director told him that the script setting had been changed, the heroine was seriously injured and comatose, and there was something wrong with Gu Chen's character, so that Jining could free play on this basis. Are you filming? Jining was stunned for a short while, her hand on the ground touched the blood flowing from the heroine, and it really felt different from the real blood, the temperature was cold, and there was no smell. At this moment, he suddenly remembered that what Gu Chen said just now was actually a line, which appeared in the original work of Rebirth of the Star Actor. In the plot of the novel, during the filming of Ghost Shadows and Deserted House, the director temporarily changed the script and let Gu Chen play the ghostly ghost attached to the human body, which is the final boss of the film. This spectre is not a lingering ghost in the old house, but a spectre who has been following the heroine since a long time ago. It loves her deeply, but she cannot perceive her existence. However, in this haunted house that has accumulated countless grievances, it got the first chance to show up, so it set up a trick to use the ghosts in the haunted house to kill a living person as long as the male protagonist also dies and the sacrifice is completed, it can use this body freely and be with the girl it secretly loves forever. This changes the original plot of the novel, so from the beginning, Jining pretended not to know, waiting for Gu Chen to stab him, but now the person who was stabbed was the heroine, and that line, Gu Chen also said to him. The conclusion seems obvious, although I don't know why, but the role of the heroine is now grafted onto him, and the ghost played by Gu Chen loves him deeply. At this time, Gu Chen stroked his face, the corners of his lips raised slightly, his aura had undergone an amazing change, although he was still smiling, his eyes were cold and dark, creepy. Exuded a deadly inhuman breath. As long as Hua Wuling is not here, he can rest assured. Thoughts flashed in his mind instantly. Jining reacted and immediately acted according to the plot in the original book, performing the scene that should belong to the heroine. He waved Gu Chen's hand away, as if he didn't care about anything else. He was about to escape by pulling the fallen heroine, and the actress who pretended to be dizzy did not know whether she got the director's instructions. Considering to cooperate with Jining, when Jining raised her arm, she used some strength herself, and did not put all her weight on him. Jining showed her due confusion and panic, but at the same time, she controlled her expression not to be too exaggerated, otherwise she would be so timid as the male protagonist, and she would be dereliction of duty. He fled with the heroine. Gu Chen stood there and watched him for a few seconds, then slowly chased after him. Speeding up, he chased after Jining and the heroine. Jining took the heroine to escape all the way, but she couldn't get rid of the black figure. The ghost in the ghost house noticed the existence of the ghost in Gu Chen's body, and suddenly became mad and rushed. Going up, I wanted to destroy this foreign invader, but none of them could compete with Gu Chen, and screamed and disappeared into the haunted house. The two got a chance to breathe. Jining bandaged the heroine's wound, but the heroine was injured so badly that her consciousness was quite blurred, and she might die at any time. In the darkness, she became a soul state, saw what happened in the old house in the past, and learned how to eliminate ghosts. Soul flies away. Jining took the heroine to fetch the dagger, and Gu Chen followed them all the way, telling his love for Jining in a very gentle voice, but dragging a man behind him, the feet of a corpse. The corpse was dripping with blood, leaving traces of blood on the floor. Stop running away. He smiled and looked at Jining's back, his eyes gradually turned into a deadly gloom. You can only be with me. Boom. Jining slammed open the bedroom door with the heroine on her back, put the heroine aside, took off the painting, smashed the upper mezzanine with a hard object, and took the dagger come out. At the same moment, Gu Chen also threw the corpse in the corridor to facilitate his arrangement. After a while, then he walked into the bedroom and called Jining's name with a smile. Jining turned around, hid the dagger behind her, and pulled the dagger away little by little, with a flustered expression on her face, but in fact she was boldly and calmly waiting for Gu Chen to approach him step by step. I've been looking forward to this day for a long time. Gu Chen held up two broken bones stained with blood. The marrow was hollowed out in the middle, like two rings. He took one of them in his hand and held it again. Jining's hand smiled and prepared to put a ring on him too. Mash! The sharp dagger pierced through the air and went straight to Gu Chen's chest. Jining didn't hesitate to use the knife, because he had already learned that his true friend had died, and now all that was left was a walking corpse and the spectre who manipulated him. He directly clenched the blade in his palm. It seemed that at this moment he was possessed by a spectre, and his body had no consciousness. His strength was great. Jining pulled the hilt of the dagger hard, trying to pull the dagger out, but the blade had even been inserted into the palm bone, but Gu Chen still had no tendency to let go of the dagger. Clang! At this time, Gu Chen pulled the dagger and threw it out far away, letting the dagger fall to the ground. It was so big that 10 fingers sank deeply. You want to kill me? After him, his expression was stiff, like a corpse. Why, you don't like this face? Or because I'm a ghost? Just because I'm a ghost. The man who was possessed by the ghost seemed to laugh but not laugh, and seemed to cry instead of crying. He pointed to a corpse he threw at the door and spoke slowly. The man ran for his life and even wanted to assassinate you. I saved you. Do you think he is more terrifying, or am I more terrifying? He forced Jining to the ground, and stared down at the person he had loved for many years. His eyes were red, his face was pale, and his black hair was messy. Completely dissipated in this world. Icy tears fell from the corners of his eyes and dripped onto Jining's face. Ning looked stunned for a few seconds, then opened her lips and made a faint sound. You! The dagger suddenly pierced Li Gui's heart from behind. The man opened his eyes wide, showing pain, clutching his chest, and slowly turning his head, he saw the seriously injured girl gasping for breath, holding a dagger in both hands. He was also staring at him full of hatred, and the look of the man falling down was reflected in his pupils. He fell on Jining, blood splattered all over him. Jining's expression flashed a moment of confusion, but when he saw the girl who was also lying on the ground, he instantly forgot everything related to Spectre, rushed up to hold the girl in his arms, and called out anxiously with her name. Fall slowly. Jining was caught off guard, his feet sank in all of a sudden, holding the girl unable to move. The black-haired man staggered up while covering his heart, pushed the girl to the ground, and suddenly grabbed Jining's wrist. Finger. I love you. He smiled and murmured, but there were tears in his eyes. Let's meet in hell. He kissed Jining's lips. In the boundless blackness, Jining opened her eyes wide and did not hide her surprise at all. Wait, what is Gu Chen doing? He obviously doesn't remember the kiss scene in this episode of the original book. Zi, dong, dong dong. The cameras hidden in the air suddenly revealed their shapes and fell down with a crackling. At the same time, an extremely cold male voice came from the earphones. Stop! The effect of the holographic projection disappeared instantly, the boiling black floor, the large swathes of blood and the sharp knife pierced into the actress' body disappeared one after another. Out of focus, lifeless, like a puppet. After a brief struggle, Gu Chen also fell into the same state. Only Jining was left in the room and remained awake. He knew that this was the sudden use of Harry-Nose. With a powerful suggestion ability, he briefly turned everyone into his puppets. It didn't take long for Harry-Nose to appear in front of Jining. Now he is in the state of the Blood Clan, with black hair floating, and the cloak rolling in the air, like a dark cloud floating, containing thunder, dark red pupils revealing fierce anger, and killing intent. Oops, he's mad. Jining of course knew why Harry-Nose was so angry, but he still showed a puzzled expression and asked, Harry-Nose? You are? Harry-Nose said nothing and looked at Jining with a heavy gaze. After a while, he suddenly stepped forward, hugged Jining's waist, and rubbed his lips hard, until Jining showed a pained expression. He stopped moving, and then also kissed. I felt a cold and soft touch on her lips, and Jining suddenly realized that she was being kissed by Harry-Nose. He was surprised, and immediately pushed Harry-Nose's chest, not because he resisted, after all, they had kissed before in the world of vampire novels, but in this world, it's just a friendship, so he didn't expect Harry-Nose to make such a move. Since he is a friend without any ambiguous relationship, of course he cannot allow Harry-Nose to do this. So Jining pushed Harry-Nose away, wiped his lips with the back of his hand, frowned, showing vague anger, and asked coldly, What are you doing? Seeing Jining's expression, Harry-Nose was obviously startled. After a moment of silence, he sighed softly, lowered his eyes, and said in a very low voice, Sorry. Jining pursed her lips with a cold face, seemingly very unhappy, but in fact he was also a little guilty, worried that Harry-Nose would do something incalculable because of jealousy. He was thinking about how to use "we will still be friends in the future" to prevaricate without a trace, but suddenly he saw Harry-Nose stretch out his hand to him, and then he felt a sudden dizzy. But now you won't understand. Jining. I don't want you to recall your old memories either. Jining woke up from the coma and found herself sitting on the ground, surrounded by Gu Chen and the actress who played the heroine, the heroine was also sitting, looking exhausted, while Gu Chen was stand beside them. After being stunned for a moment, Jining immediately realized that this was the basement of a haunted house, and the three of them were surrounded by a salt circle. It turned out that at this time, the plot went backwards and Gu Chen was about to be exposed to being possessed by a ghost. The true face of the scene, and the scene of stabbing the last person. At this moment, many fragments flashed through Jining's mind, making him quickly understand what was going on. After he fainted, Harry Nose once again altered his memory, erasing the scene where they kissed, not even just kissing. Harry Nose also deleted a lot about the movie. The memory of the filming removed the plot of Gu Chen seriously hurting the heroine, as well as all the emotional scenes with Jining. And not only Jining's memory, the memory of everyone on the set has been modified and replaced with a new memory. There was a problem with the invisible camera before, which caused them to repair it for a long time. Only now is the official filming of the scene that begins in the basement. In other words, because Harry Nose was jealous, they simply scrapped all the previously filmed content, and they have to reshoot now. But in this reshoot, will Gu Chen want to stab him or the heroine? Just as this thought flashed in Jining's mind, he felt a pain in his back, and then he fell to the ground, seeing the holographic projection under him simulating a lot of blood. Gu Chen walked in front of him, looking down at him with creepy eyes. This review is the one who stabbed him. It seems that the plot is finally back on track. Although there was pain in her body, Jining was very relieved. According to the original plot, she closed her eyes and pretended to be dizzy. Then she was supported by the heroine and began to flee desperately in the haunted house. Sequel plot. The content of the film after that was a copy of Jining and Gu Chen. At the end of the film, Jining held up her extremely weak body, covered with blood, and staggered to pick up. He stabbed Gu Chen with a dagger, and then fell down again. The floor turned into a sticky black. Gu Chen's Li Gui was about to dissipate. He looked at the heroine sadly and desperately, slowly raised his hand, as if he wanted to touch her again a bit. Why doesn't this review Chen act in the kiss scene? Ning, who was lying in the black mucus, watched intently, but until the holographic projection simulated Gu Chen completely dissipated, leaving only a pile of white bones on the ground, Gu Chen did not kiss the heroine. So their previous kiss scene really came from Gu Chen's own wishes? Can Gu Chen have such a high opinion of him? The spectre dissipated in the old house. The life he gained through sacrifice was returned to everyone at the last moment, and all the dead were resurrected. Her friend, I wish her happiness in the future. At the end of the story, a group of people left the old house with each other's arms. When they entered the old house, they lost their way in the forest, but when they walked out of the old house, a snow-white flower suddenly bloomed on the road. Guide them the way out. Part of the crew stayed to deal with various equipment, and the rest left the set and took the aircraft to a well-known hotel for a dinner together. The director is very satisfied with the final result of the filming, especially he is full of praise for Gu Chen's acting skills. For such praise, Gu Chen behaved very modestly, saying that he would continue to study, and the director also praised Jining. After all, after so many worlds, Jining's acting skills are the same. It is also impeccable, and it is not easy to hide clumsiness. I am very pleased to see the excellent performance of the two of you young people. I suddenly thought of a better plot development, but unfortunately the film has been completed. I hope there will be opportunities to continue to cooperate with you. In the luxurious venue, the director raised his glass and smiled at Gu Chen and Jining. Jining was holding a wine glass, maintaining a high cold persona, without saying a word, and glanced at Harry Nose not far away. The handsome Blood was standing at the table, holding a glass of red wine as red as blood. He stood still with his eyes down, wondering what he was thinking. After coming out of the studio, Harry Nose has always been like this, without any smile. Obviously everything is so prosperous and noisy, but he is cold and lonely, so out of place. Pretending to have erased the memory of the kiss, Jining could still treat Harry Nose like a friend, so he naturally asked him if he had anything on his mind, but Linus just smiled and didn't answer him. But Jining can probably guess the reason. Before he passed out, he vaguely heard what Harry Nose said. Harry Nose didn't want him to remember the past, but he remembered everything by himself. The so-called past events are actually in the world of vampire literature. At that time, Jining was a vampire hunter. He hated vampires because his parents were killed, and Harry Nose was a vampire prince. But the relationship between the two of them is twisted. In that world, Jining was very painful, he had to act very bitter and hated every day, showing his extreme hatred, and Harry Nose initially approached him at the time, he also pretended to be a human being. After the lie was exposed, Jining had to show that he hated Harry Nose because he deceived him. Later, for some reason, Harry Nose imprisoned him, forced him to embrace him for the first time, made a blood pact, they tortured each other spiritually, and finally he swallowed the silver cross. He committed suicide and died in Harry Nose's arms. Thinking of the experience in that world, Jining couldn't help but feel a little sighed, and became a little absent-minded, and didn't notice that Gu Chen's eyes fell on him. Gu Chen looked at Jining next to him, his expression did not change, his smile was gentle, but his eyes suddenly darkened a bit, because he found that Jining was looking at Harry Nose. He always cared so much about his friend. Gu Chen's thin lips pursed slightly and his eyes sank. Although he put on a mask and completely concealed his mood, he was also a human being and would also feel tired. So flawless. Ming Ming and Jining haven't known each other for a long time, but he just cares about Jining very much. Maybe since his rebirth, Jining is the first person who didn't reject him, but it seems that it wasn't all. He always felt that there were many things hidden in Jining that were deeply attracted to him. He wanted to have a closer relationship with Jining, but Jining always felt a little alienated from him. Only in front of that friend would Jining's expression soften. Fortification will not exclude the closeness of friends. But even if he and Jining become friends, no matter how close they are, can they compare to Jining and Harry Nose? This thought flashed through Gu Chen's mind. He felt amused, because he was clearly not familiar with Jining, but even so, there was still something in his heart, the irritability that does not appear, even has a tendency to gradually increase. Really? He shook his head and put down the wine glass in his hand. He couldn't drink any more, maybe it was the catalyst of alcohol that made his mood a little unstable. He looked at Jining again, now Jining had withdrawn his gaze and was talking to the director. As an artist, Jining's appearance is definitely very outstanding, with beautiful eyebrows and eyes, cool temperament, very white complexion, light brown pupils, slender fingers and transparent goblet. The warm light reflected a hazy halo, shining on his eyelashes and pale lips, making his face and figure a bit more unreal and illusory. At this moment, a broken fragment suddenly flashed in front of Gu Chen's eyes. It seemed to be an illusion, but it seemed to be a reality that once happened. Standing in the thick darkness, he kissed Jining's lips, still full of love, said softly to Jining, "I love you." His heart suddenly trembled, and he felt a strange throbbing. What is this? At the same time, Jining also sighed in her heart that Harry Nose's memory removal was not entirely beneficial. The emotional scenes he and Gu Chen filmed before were so useless. Gu Chen was impressed. It's such a pity, if Gu Chen still remembers it, maybe he will have a better impression of him. At this time, the director raised the glass to toast to Jining. Jining also raised the glass to signal, took a sip, the alcohol entered the esophagus, which immediately made Jining feel dizzy, and her body shook, fell immediately. No way! This body turned out to be a cup. It's not even accurate to describe it, it's just a mouthful. Before he fell drunk, Jining only had time to have this thought, and his eyes fell into darkness. However, he did not completely lose consciousness. In this darkness, he actually heard a distant call, each call repeating the same two words. Jining! Jining! Jining's consciousness was plunged into darkness, and her ears were ringing with overlapping calls. These calls did not originate from the same person or the same language. They were male and female, and some were old. Some were immature, mixed with the roars and cries of beasts, and there were even many voices that Jining couldn't understand. The sound of this call strongly attracted the mind. He took a step forward, but suddenly felt his body fall down, as if he fell into the abyss with one foot, and kept falling down. The darkness in front of him suddenly flashed many blurry pictures. Under the altar made of skeletons, there are also white bones like mountains and seas, both humans and beasts. These skeletons trembled slightly, making a vague hum, and I heard it for a long time. Only then did Jining realize that these voices were actually the voices calling his name just now. He continued to fall down, and the screen flashed in a flash, changing to the center of the altar, in a dark blue candle, sitting a silver-haired man. The man was dressed in black clothes, his shoulders were scattered like waterfalls of silver hair, his appearance was cold and handsome, his eyes were dark and deep, as quiet as a deep pool, with a chilling and fierce aura, sitting on top of the heavy bones. Just one more look is enough to make people sweat. The first time Jining saw him, he felt a little bit of a shudder, but then he looked more closely, but suddenly felt a bit inexplicably familiar. But before he could fully recall, the silver-haired man suddenly raised his head and swept his gaze towards Jining's direction. Go! The man's figure dissipated, and Jining was still falling. I don't know how long he fell. He finally stopped and fell into a piece of white bones, but his body was as light as a fog, not touching even the smallest bones. It's still the same altar, the difference is that Jining seemed to be looking at the flashing pictures, but this time he really entered the range of the altar. An inexplicable force drove him to the altar. This time, the silver-haired man was not here. Instead, a fiery red figure lay quietly in the center of the altar, as if he had fallen into a deep sleep. Jining was uncontrollably attracted by the shadow, and walked over slowly. Then he lowered his head, and by the candlelight, he could see this figure clearly. Lying on the altar was a young man, wearing a bright red wedding dress, with beautiful eyebrows, but his face was bloodless and lifeless. He had the exact same face as Jining. At the celebration feast after the film was finished, Jining, who took a sip of wine, was overwhelmed by his drinking power. Seeing that he was standing unsteadily, Gu Chen hurriedly reached out his hand to support him, but one step ahead of him, Hairy Nose had already embraced Jining in his arms. Lowered his eyes with concern, he looked at the person in his arms. Jining suddenly fell down, which startled the director, thinking that he had not recovered from his injury before. But what is wrong now? He hurriedly asked. What's wrong with Xiaoji? He's fine. Hairy Nose stroked Jining's blushing face, looked at it for a few seconds, then said with a slight smile, he's just drunk. Really? The director couldn't believe it. After all, Jining didn't feel like drinking just now. It would be better to say that he dipped a bit of alcohol on his lips and just got drunk. But since it was said by Jining's friend, the director had no reason not to believe it, so he smiled and said, then it's hard for you to help him go there to rest for a while, and ask me to call someone for help. You. Hairy Nose smiled and was about to decline his proposal, but Gu Chen smiled and said, I'm here to help, okay. Hairy Nose glanced at him silently, then raised his eyebrows suddenly, as if thinking of something. He acquiesced to Gu Chen's suggestion. The two of them supported Jining's and arm took him to the rest area. The lounge area and the dining area are connected, separated by elegant potted plants, and there are many sets of sofas and coffee tables. Although the dining area there is very lively, the floor of the rest area is equipped with sound-absorbing devices. It seemed a lot quieter. Put him down. Place Jining well. Hairy Nose also sat down next to him, with his long legs crossed, sitting in a relaxed yet elegant posture, obviously not intending to return to the crew. Gu Chen stood there and looked at them, as if he didn't intend to leave immediately. Hairy Nose squinted at him, curled his lips, and said lightly, I'm here watching the little boy. Ning is enough, you can go back. Senior seems to have a good relationship with Mr. Helinois. Gu Chen doesn't seem to care about his indifference, and still has a gentle attitude. He smiled and said, "You guys should be friends who have known each other for a long time. What do you want to say?" "I'm just envious," Gu Chen said, "because I also want to become good friends with Senior Jining." Harino's eyes sank slightly. "It's quite straightforward. So I hope to get along well with you, because you are a friend of the senior." Gu Chen said, "I wonder what you think. Want to be friends with us?" "Yes." Speaking, he suddenly leaned over to Jining and placed a light kiss on his lips, then turned his head and said to Gu Chen with a smile, "Because I never wanted to be just his friend. Do you understand?" Gu Chen's pupils shrank suddenly. When Jining saw the young man lying on the altar with the exact same face as him, and the wedding dress, he was a little surprised at first, and then suddenly recalled who the silver-haired man was. She is also easy to be shy, and her hair is just ordinary black hair. If it wasn't for seeing this body in a red wedding dress, Jining might not be able to remember it for a while, but with this wedding dress, the reminder is obvious. After all, he is only in the world of Xianhuan has the opportunity to come into contact with such clothes. His identity in this world is Ying Qiankai's engagement person. How did this body come from? It should not exist. Jining was puzzled, because his ending in this world was as miserable as ever, and in the end he was directly smashed to ashes. Where did Ying Qiankai get this body? This is not a real body, it is made of materials unique to this world. The cold male voice suddenly echoed in Jining's mind. It was the future of the system. It is very rare for him to take the initiative to talk to Jining, and it is very important, so Jining immediately asked, "What happened?" "Your soul is in a delicate state, because Ying Qiankai held a blood sacrifice ritual for you. Part of your soul was attracted by the ritual, so you appeared here." "You mean conjuring the soul?" Jining was stunned. "That means this is Ying Qiankai's world." "Yes, Ying Qiankai's world is also merging with Gu Chen's world, and the universes of the two worlds have merged and become an interconnected existence." Future said, "Ying Qiankai's soul calling ceremony is effective because of this, but it is not stable. How will it affect me?" Ning always only asked the key points. "Worst case, your soul will be split. You will exist in two worlds at the same time, you may lose your mind due to the split of your soul." Future wrote, "In special circumstances, I can apply to your superiors to restore your soul, and the probability of soul splitting is very low. You will most likely encounter a situation where consciousness alternates between two worlds appear. You can't go back now. In addition, the soul will quickly become very weak and even dissipate without the protection of the body for a long time." "I see." Jining nodded, but didn't panic. The body wasn't right in front of him, as long as he used the body that should be prepared by Qiankaiu. As for how to deal with Qiankaiu, then it was something to consider later, and he believed he could still handle it. Before they exchanged a few words, Jining found that her fingers had become a little more transparent, allowing the future to take the initiative to find him. It was indeed a very critical matter. This kind of soul weakened the speed is really worrying. The method for the soul to return to the body, Jining knew that it was actually very simple. Just imagine himself getting into the bed, but when he tried to put his hand into the body, he found himself he couldn't get in at all. This body was actually repelling his soul. "This body has not yet completed the final shaping, you cannot use it." Future said, "You need to find a new body immediately. Next time you should say this first." Jining turned around and ran off the altar of bones, trying to find a suitable body in this huge flash of darkness, but most of the corpses on the ground had been turned into bones, and the more the corpses went outside the fresher it was, but it was already broken and corrupt, and Jining couldn't get in. What's worse, this cave is extremely huge, although the path is not complicated, but Jining has not been able to get out after walking for a long time. His soul has become more and more transparent. He ran for a long time, and he was swaying and was about to lose his support, but at this moment, he suddenly found a complete corpse, a young monster with white fur cub, cute in appearance, like a fluffy puppy. The current situation no longer allowed Jining to choose. He quickly put his finger on the white cub, and his whole soul was smoothly integrated into it. After a while, he slowly opened his eyes, and the tip of his nose smelled a faint rotten breath, which was emanating from the surrounding bones, but perhaps it was specially treated. This smell was not thick, otherwise he will definitely faint immediately. Let's leave this cave now. Jining used the cub's body to stand up staggeringly, trying his best to maintain his balance, but before he took a few steps, he fell to the ground with a squeak. Get out so far. Jining was rolled so badly that he almost vomited, and when he finally stopped rolling, he suddenly found a pair of feet in his sight. A pair of feet in black boots.